Hello, everyone, and welcome to Heart and Hand, the Rangers podcast. This is your extra show. It's Cammy here. I am back because the international break is drawing to a close and Rangers take on Livingston at Ibrox on Saturday afternoon. And here to talk to me about not only the Rangers game, but I'm sure a very, very happy Scotland fan as well, is young Ross Hutton. Ross, are you sober yet?
Just about. I think I've managed to dry myself out for the podcast, Cammy, so no, thank you for having me. I think the more remarkable thing is that my voice is held up for this, but we'll see how we go on.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Scotland have qualified for the first World Cup in your lifetime, Ross. Tell me a wee bit about how that feels, and if you are going to America next year.
Now, you can ask my fiance that yourself, to be honest.
I think it's going to be a short answer, if I'm being honest, and 2 letters rather than 3.
Well, it's funny because for a while she keeps asking me, where do you want to go on a holiday next summer? And I keep saying like Seattle or Boston. I'm kind of trying to work on that one
A
at the
beach
minute.
holiday.
Yeah, apparently I've got a wedding to pay for, but we can play that one by ear. No, I joke because it feels absolutely wonderful. And I think for me, for as long as I've been on this site, I've been talking about that sort of dual sense of identity that I have as not just a Rangers fan, first and foremost, and it is always first and foremost as a Rangers fan, but also as a Scotland fan as well. And I think growing up, not just in a very difficult period for the large part of my life, Cammy, with the national team not really qualifying for anything, not even being close to qualifying for a World Cup. Going through some really embarrassing results. I mean, I remember obviously the 3-0 away to Kazakhstan and some real humiliations in there. So to go through not just a difficult time on the park, but a very difficult time off it with, I think, the relationship between many Rangers fans and the national team being irreparably fractured for a lot of people. So having to kind of grow up and go through that has been very difficult. Not saying that in a sob story type of way, but it's just the reality of it. You're constantly having to justify to yourself why you do it and then justify to other people why you do it. It's not been the easiest of rides. So last night felt like a hell of a payoff for that. And I think one of the things that I found incredibly heartwarming last night was actually seeing the amount of Rangers fans that did take pride in the national team qualifying for a World Cup, because the argument I've always made is that a strong Scotland should always have a strong Rangers presence within it, both on and off the park, in the stands and on the pitch. A strong Rangers is good for Scotland as a team, and a strong Scotland is good for Rangers, because the more players, generally speaking, that we can get playing at the highest level, showcasing them in competitions like the World Cup, it's good for our players' morale, it's good for our players' valuations, if we're being honest, if we're looking to move them on. So there's a dual benefit there in a lot of ways. So it's not been the easiest of rides, it's been a hellish one, actually, throughout the majority of my lifetime, but you feel as though you're getting a bit of a reward now for the kind of dedication and trudging through it. So it meant a lot last night. It was an emotional one. I think I'm speaking to a lot of people who have said the same thing, and I had the privilege of watching it with some of my mates that I went to school with, and doing that meant a lot as well. So it's been good. It's been a fantastic international break in that regard. Had a lot of highs and a lot of lows. I'm looking forward to getting back to some hopeful normality with Rangers over the next few months as well, Cammy. But taking Scotland as it is, yeah, it's been a wonderful few days.
Did you get any strange looks when you refused to celebrate Kieran Tierney's goal?
Just standing there staunchly with my arms folded,
Just
yeah.
like that, I'm not having it. Yeah, no,
I was still going. I was still going around everyone saying that we should have signed Lord and Shanklin by that point. Didn't even really notice the goal, to be honest. But yeah, and this is the thing, and I get for a lot of people that you do need to kind of almost. It's really difficult to put this into words. For a lot of people, you just can't leave. I don't want to say leave at the door, but you just can't countenance the idea of having to celebrate a goal from a Celtic player or Kieran Tierney or anyone like that. And I understand that. I've never argued that anyone absolutely has to support the national team. It's a personal decision going on individual to individual. I'm not here to tell anyone that they're wrong for not celebrating Kieran Tierney scoring or not supporting the national team. That's not my place to do, so it's your own personal decision. But for me, being a Rangers fan and a Scotland fan is interlinked. As I've said, I think it's a good thing for both of us, for the national team and for Rangers as a club, which is always the most important thing. So, yeah, I was going as mental as anyone when that goal went in, but I think it's been slightly eclipsed, actually, by the Kenny McLean effort.
It's been very much eclipsed by the Kenny McLean effort. Just, Know your heritage, son. That's all I'm saying. And more importantly than that, I am old enough where I could have turned around to my Celtic supporting friends when we watched Scotland versus Brazil and said, "That's Tom Boyd that's caused that. You're all wankers." But anyway, we move on. And but on a serious note, it is nice to be able to see Scotland at the World Cup. How we'll fare when we get there will be another kettle of fish entirely. But yeah, as I say, we'll deal with that next year when it comes. But genuinely, Ross, I'm delighted for you because you say you've had to put in the hard yards for it. And I get the argument in terms of where there's probably a lot of Rangers fans who are completely disenfranchised with the national team. But for people like yourself who, as I say, are true to it, then I was delighted for you to be able to celebrate Tuesday night, but also look forward to next summer as well. Because let's face it, we could do with some good news and a bit of kind of cheering up as well. So, yeah, it was nice to see. It was nice to see. Ross, let's get on to the proper stuff and why we're both here. And I'm sure all the listeners are with us as well in terms of Rangers are back in action on Saturday afternoon. It's been an interesting international break. We have had plenty of players away representing their countries at various levels. Some with mixed degrees of success. Bojan Majowski, I'm fairly sure, will be one of those players who felt it was good for him to be able to get a goal. And if the game could have finished there against Wales, then that would have been fantastic. But yeah, they got an absolute peltering. And there's been some mixed results, I think, for some of the other Rangers players who were away on international duty. What will be interesting, I think you've touched on a great point there as well, is with the World Cup around the corner and obviously a number of our players interested is the effect that it will have on the January window, which is only a few short weeks away as well, Ross. I think that as things stand at the moment, Rangers will, as we know, have to do quite a bit of business in January, ideally. Hopefully, spend the money well, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. But for the players who are going to be going to the finals next year, it's really important for them now just to continue keeping themselves within their international setup and continuing to impress. I'll be honest with you, you talk about that and you think immediately about Nico Raskan. I think he's cemented his place in the Belgian team. It'll be interesting to see what happens with any potential moves. I don't think he'll be going in January. I don't think he wants to move and then potentially risk it. But if he goes and has a good World Cup, with a year left in his deal, I think it could be interesting to see what valuations we get for him.
And this is kind of the thing, and it's true of any player going to a World Cup playing for any nation, so it's not necessarily a Rangers point in isolation, but this is where that duality does become a bit of an issue because, yeah, we've just spoken about how passionate a Scotland fan I am, but my God, if we were playing in a Scottish Cup final next May, and then I think for a second one of our players maybe has an eye on going to the World Cup and is therefore not giving 100%, maybe not going full-throated into challenges, maybe not pushing himself the extra yard, they'll be held to pay for that. And I think that's the worry now. It kind of comes in two ways. You can have players who will try and burst an absolute gut to try and justify a selection in their international setup, and that's the huge carrot that a lot of players who have nations that will be going to the World Cup can have now, and it's such an inspiring factor, and you can maybe get the benefit from that as a club. But then you do have the worry that, you know, players might not want to go in for that 50-50 tackle that's so important just in case they get injured. And I'm not picking on Nico Raskin specifically here, but I'll use him as an example because you mentioned him. He plays such a vital role for us, Cammy, in the middle of the park, going into those challenges, winning the ball back. I think you're right. I think he pretty much has cemented his place in the Belgian squad now, and well done to him. He's one of those ones that I think as a Rangers fan, you do really hope goes and has a fantastic World Cup because that will only benefit us one way or another. Maybe that's in terms of his valuation going up. Maybe that's in terms of him, I don't know, signing a new deal and coming back twice the player. But you hope that it can only be a good outcome for Rangers. You just don't want to see him in a situation where his head kind of goes in that direction. And as I say, that's not a Nico Raskin point. That's true of literally anyone in that situation. And we mentioned the January market there as well. It's such a difficult one, but again, you can maybe get a bit of a World Cup benefit from it because you see all across the world, managers talking about players who need minutes to be able to get into the World Cup squad. If there's value we can find in January of players who maybe do want to come to Rangers, who will add to our squad, who will be a good addition, but you're kind of the quid pro quos are doing it for sort of slightly selfish reasons because they maybe it's a loan deal, maybe so they can get minutes ahead of the World Cup. you take what you can get. It's a famously very difficult market. So it's twofold. There's advantages and there's disadvantages, but there is opportunity there if we're smart enough to go and get it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that you're absolutely right. Players who, I suppose, will be in the fringes of the selection for their international teams if they've made the finals will then want to be able to play. They'll want to get themselves back into the frame for appearing for their country. And yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what could happen with that. Fundamentally, however, I think because the January window is so critical for Rangers, both short and long term, whilst I imagine that loan deals will probably be preferable, there is opportunities there to obviously bring players in at that point on a contracted situation where we could pay in a deal. Then fair enough, that works if it's right for us. But during the break, Kevin Thelwell did an interview with Rangers TV where he pretty much spoke about the January window and the manager's inclusion in terms of being able to acquire targets as well. David Edgar on our Patreon site made a really interesting point. One of the shows, I can't remember which one it was, forgive me, but where it was quite an interesting dynamic that Thelwell appears to have created there, where if players come in badly, Danny Rill's got a little bit of leeway in terms of what has to happen, but ultimately, a lot of our fans will continue to say the damage was already done in last summer's window. Equally, if they're a success, it could look like, well, Danny Rule has picked them, therefore that summer window is still a disaster, and we were lucky that we got away with it. So, what I found really interesting about how that's going to be perceived, Ross, is that it's bought Thelwell a degree of cover, but I don't think it's brought me any cover that is going to wash with the fans. I don't think anyone is going to change on this, and no one's going to change their mind really until the January window comes around, and then we start to assess what players that we do bring in at that stage. And Thelwell, let's face it, he has to be able to make up ground in terms of what's happened at this stage. So, irrespective of the managerial changes and what's happened up to this point and what's got us to halfway through the season, it's still going to be critical to be able to look at the players that we're looking at bringing in. You're mentioning the Scottish Cup there. Listen, do you know what? See if Rangers could get to a stage where we win the league. You, me, no one else who would give a jot about what could happen with the Scottish Cup if we're able to recover the league from the position that we're in at the moment. But all joking aside, we need stability within the squad and we need an uplift in terms of the overall level of quality that we've brought in to date.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, I've been quite critical of Kevin Thelwell on these podcasts before, but one thing I'll never criticise him for is actually doing interviews like that and communicating. I'm not sure he said anything massively groundbreaking in it, but I'll never ever criticise him for actually sitting down and doing an interview like that and being more open and honest and transparent with the fans. So full credit to him for that. It can't be an easy one for him to sit and do because I think you look at the comments immediately after a post like that goes up, Cammy, and it's people criticise them, calling for his head. And, I've said on these podcasts before that I don't think he should be in the position that he's in anymore, so I'm not going to hide from that. So credit to him for that. It takes balls. I think you need to be able to hold your hands up and say fair play. Against that, you do need to judge people by actions rather than words, and the reality is still the same as it was before the international break. He hired Russell Martin, made a bit of a mess, it seems, about hiring the replacement. Okay, I think Danny Rowe's a good coach. I think he might be a success at Rangers, but the actual process of ending up at A to B seemed to be a bit of a zigzag and a bit of a riot. He'd spent £8 million on Yusuf Trimiti, which, I mean, how many hours have you got in the day to talk about that? And that's the record that he's being currently judged on. Now, he's obviously said in that interview and over the international break that Danny Rowe, rightly, as the head coach, gets the sign off on any new players coming into the club. But what you might find yourself in is a position where any good signings, Danny Rowe's boys, any bad signings are just automatically in the minds of the fans, Kevin Thelwell's boys, whether that's right or wrong, whether that's fair or not. It's actually kind of neither here nor there because it speaks to the point that you've made so well, is that so many people have made their minds up. I'd probably include myself there, to be honest. It's very, very difficult to come back from that. Now, you can go and sign 4, 5, 6 absolutely outstanding players in January, and they all come in and they all hit the ground running and they totally transform our season. Fantastic. We're all praying for that, right? As much as I don't think Will should be in his position, that doesn't mean I don't want him to be a success while he's there, right? Those are two completely different things. But it's the original sin this summer, and he's always going to be judged against that. And I think it's so bad. It was such a cock-up that I think it's just an irreparable situation that he's in now. And there is a part of me that does think everything we speak about until he almost inevitably, it feels, moves on from the role, is just sort of noise. And for the club, maybe even for Danny Rule, for the 49ers, for the new owners and administration, actually moving him on, and probably for himself, if I'm being honest, moving him on, taking him out the firing line, it kind of clears the air a wee bit. As I said, that summer's the original sin. I'm not sure if we can move past that, but while he's there, I want him to be a success, and if he can find the value that you and I have just spoken about in January, then absolutely. But the squad planning's been an absolute disaster, so actually going to try and add quality in there and supplement, that's going to be a hell of an uphill challenge.
Well, one piece of recruitment that has already happened in the last week or so, Ross, has been the arrival of Scott Fry into the coaching staff for Danny Rule, where he has come from Lincoln City. Came in as a set-piece specialist, which is, I think, been music to all of our ears, given how poor we have been from our set plays, both offensively and defensively. He has come in with a really high pedigree from Lincoln. I think he was, or the overall ratio, I think, was 1-2. Or maybe just under that for the goals that Lincoln scored last season. One of every two was from a set piece. It's something that has worked for us to a degree across part of the season this year, but at the same point, it's been so poor in terms of our defensive setup as well. There's a bigger piece, obviously, about the fact that our defence at times has just looked so leaky and disorganised, but especially from corners where we've got no idea who is supposed to be where, what is supposed to be going on. You saw it more recently against Roma, where I think it was their second goal. There was, or actually, I think it was their first goal. There was just, it's calamitous. Do you know what I mean? And when you've got players who can line up at the back post and there's at least two of them to be able to nod at home, it just does not work. Now, we give everything a degree of time, as always. It's not going to be fixed overnight. But I'm hoping and I'm encouraged that we have looked at a problem and we have looked to address that problem, and hopefully it bears fruit.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with these kind of set piece coaches, and it's an area of the game that's getting a lot more TLC that it deserves now with these set piece coaches, I think automatically your brain just thinks about the attacking side of it. Most famous one obviously being Nicolas Jover at Arsenal, who's totally transformed them. Corners are basically penalties for Arsenal. At one point, they were that potent when it came to attacking corners. But for us, baby steps. Let's just start with defending them properly, please. Because so many of our goals this season have been so avoidable. And you and I actually done that Roma pod in the extra that week, and we spoke about how frustrating it was that when you're playing a side of that quality, who do have the ability to cut you open if they want, to concede goals so cheaply like that from set pieces, it's unforgivable at that level. And the fact you were right to say there were 2-3 Roma players queuing up at the back post and all that, and it's just not acceptable. So if we can come in and, as baby steps, make us much more solid and robust when it comes to defending set pieces, then I'll be really excited to see what he can do in terms of transforming us actually attacking set pieces as well. Because I think Lincoln City last year had the most set piece goals in League One. I think it was 30 of them or something like that, which is just an obscene amount.
I think it was. I think it was over all four divisions.
Yeah, well, exactly. So he comes in obviously knowing his stuff, and he comes in with a really good pedigree from that. So if he can transform us at both ends of the pitch in terms of our corners, in terms of our overall set pieces, then it could be an absolute revelation for us. Because how many times have we been watching Rangers over the past few years, Cammy, where we've not been able to either break a team down or we've not just been able to crack the code and unlock them? Listen, let's be honest, our attacking output right now is poor from open play. So we need to be able to maximise those different attacking options there. So if that's a difference maker in a tight game at Hibs or Hearts or at Parkhead, wherever it is, then it's worth its weight in gold. So it's one that I'm really happy about. I was maybe hoping to, just in terms of appointments, I was maybe hoping to have seen the appointment of the local coach, I kind of use that in air quotes, that Danny Rolo has spoken about before over the international break, you would have maybe have thought that would have been a good time to try and get somebody like that in, embed them into the culture that Danny Rolo wants to create. But as a start, I'm more than happy with this because, as I say, it's an area of the game that's getting a lot more dedication now that I think is deserved for a long time, and we need to be at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I've had a few different names attached to that post, which I think could be interesting in terms of what Danny Rule is looking for specifically from that coach, because the offset is that whilst they know the club inside and out, a lot of the names I've heard mentioned, they don't have overwhelmingly exhaustive experience within coaching. I understand that those two things would be incredibly difficult to find. We do not have a queue of former players who have that. But at the same point, um, if he can offset that with whoever the individual is that he's looking to be able to try and bring in, and what value they're bringing into the coaching staff, then it does make sense. There's a part of me as well, Ross, and I do get the disappointment it hasn't been announced, um, because you would want to try and get all of that done within an international break. That would definitely help. Then obviously those players who are away, they return, and then we kind of start the ball rolling towards obviously quite a busy festive schedule. I understand all of that, but equal at the same point, I want us to be able to try and do our level of due diligence here. Let's just not get someone in just for the sake of it, and then we'll worry about all the rest of it afterwards. We've done that before, and it hasn't worked. Now,
Oh,
what I
listen,
think,
it's more a moan than a criticism in my
no, no,
Cammy. I'd rather we
but
took the time and get it right.
no,
So yeah, yeah, that's fine.
I think it's valid, but I also think as well that we've probably addressed a larger piece, which, as you've mentioned, is around what we do within set plays, how we can utilize that and bring it out as a little bit of our weaponry. Um, and what I think is probably going to be the most important thing with whomever this local coach, as you rightly say, is going to be, is the chemistry between him and Danny Rule, and how we can then utilize what they can bring into the role. And I'm fine with taking our time to be able to do that. If that means that we get them in potentially halfway through the season and we go into Christmas and New Year and that person is then I'm all right with that, as long as we are making the right selection.
Yeah, totally agree. Like I said, it's more a moan than a criticism. It was just the way, obviously, I think Danny Rowe was talking before the international break, saying I think he was trying to progress that interview process and that selection process onto the next stage. I was maybe thinking we might have got an announcement from it, but you're totally right. Like any recruitment process, you'd rather take the time and get it right than rush it and get it wrong. You don't just want to hire a Scottish name or an ex-player in there just for the sake of having one for when the players come back. You don't want to take the time and get it right. It's just something I thought we might have seen a wee bit more progress on. But I totally take your point, and I agree actually that if you had to pick one of them, then you're picking getting the set piece coach in, because that is an immediate issue that needs fixed and looked at. It was just, as I say, it was more a moan or an observation than any kind of great level of criticism at them. I would rather we took the time and got it right, but just I kind of thought we might see more progress on it.
Yeah, but we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens with it. Let's look ahead to Saturday afternoon, Ross, with Livingston. Coming over, Livingston do not have their troubles to seek. They are at the bottom of the table. It's actually quite tight in the bottom five. Aberdeen, St Mirren, Kilmarnock, Dundee, and Livingston. There is 3 points separates those five teams. So I don't know why, maybe it's a strip colour, but I always think that Livingston are a potential banana skin for us. I've said before, I've got a lot of respect for David Martindale. I think he's a very, very good coach. I think he can bring players together. I don't think it's going to be too difficult, but we haven't earned the right by any means yet to be able to say that domestic games should be a fairly routine victory yet. They're getting better, and we are getting into the right end of the results column. However, we are at the moment just now talking about what can we do. Just now, we'll obviously Celtic don't play until later on Saturday night, so we can start to put a bit of ground on them, even if it's temporary. Hearts aren't playing until Sunday, so the most important thing I think for Rangers to be able to focus on right now is our defensive selection, because we've got a number of players who are coming back from international duty having received knocks. Now, we're recording this on Wednesday night, listeners, so we haven't had a chance to hear from Danny Rule yet or get any kind of form of injury update. But at the moment just now, John Souttar obviously couldn't play against Scotland. He got injured in the warm up. I very much believe that that would have been something that would have been a concern. If it was going to be a slight tweak or whatever he had done and he felt he could play, I think he would have played because it was a massive game for Scotland. So I have got some concerns over the severity of that. Derek Cornelius also had to come off after taking a knock when he was on international break. So this will be interesting, Ross, in terms of what we look to be able to put out. We could be looking at potentially Fernandez and Giga, centre half. Enciala is still in the squad. Rangers put out a teaser tweet, I suppose you could say, about Sterling is now obviously back in, looking healthy, but I think this game will be too soon for him. I think we'll look to bleed him back into the squad. We've got the alternate option as well of potentially putting Tav in right centre half and Max Aarons filling in at right back. Magoma played and captained for the England under-20s, so he's obviously been playing during international break as well. But it's going to be an interesting decision for Danny Rule to make.
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking about it when you were talking there, and Tav going into centre half crossed my mind as well. Again, the concern is how long these injuries are going to be, because you look at the depth or lack thereof in their backline. Enciala's not kicked the ball for months. He's not really been in the picture. We could be, weeks away from Sterling actually being ready to come on and play a full 90 minutes or even feature at all. So you're really trying to look at fixes just to get through to that point. And if Cornelius and Suter are both out in the long term, then that is going to be really difficult as we go into December and the really gruelling run of games that we've got going on there. So I'll be interested to see how Danny Rule adapts to that. He seems like a coach who doesn't mind tweaking things, and he's spoken about that before, that he's quite happy to adapt game to game, but that'll be a hell of a challenge for him, and it's really the last thing he needed as well, to be honest, is you get more injuries and more selection headaches, and not in a positive way. Going into the weekend in the game against Livingston, it's a couple of weeks that I've had my eye on for a wee while, just in terms of us. Not that we've got any right to, because you're absolutely spot on with the form we've had domestically. But obviously we play Livingston this weekend, and then we play Falkirk at Ibrox next weekend as well. So on paper, it's two games that Rangers should be winning at Ibrox 100 times out of 100. There's no excuse not to take 6 points out of 6 from those two games. At the same time, Celtic go away to St Mirren and to Hibs, and Hearts are away to Aberdeen and to Motherwell. So there's potential for drop points there. I'm not saying that's definitely going to happen, but the potential's there. It could be a 7-8 day stretch where we actually are able to make up some ground in the league and get some real momentum behind us. If we are fortunate enough to beat Livingston and Falkirk, it's wild that I'm even saying that, then that's 5 league wins on the bounce, and a wee bit of momentum building going into December and January, where the fixtures are really, really tough. So just for the squad, for the morale, if we can actually claw ourselves up the table a wee bit, close the gap on the top, it could be huge for us. It really could be huge for us. But we can't let ourselves end up in the trap on Saturday afternoon where we get drawn into Livingston's game. It's stodgy, it's stuffy, it's stop-start. A fast start and an early goal would do so much for us. Like it did against Dundee at Dent a couple of weeks ago, Cammy. It would do so much for us. It would really settle everybody down, let us grow into the game, and then you can maybe put on a bit of a performance. But I'm still not in the mindset of going into any of these games expecting or demanding a performance. It's still just about getting the win and taking those baby steps back up to actually building some confidence and momentum.
The big thing, I think, for me, and this is probably where it's kind of twofold, is not necessarily the injuries that we have at the moment and the severity of them. And as I say, we don't know anything about that yet, and how much Danny Rule does unveil in his press conference will be interesting. But if we've got players who could play against Livingston, I don't want to take the risk with Braga around the corner. And in the same way, the best result, I think, for us, Ross, is to be able to put on a performance that doesn't have to exert a lot of energy against Livingston. And listen, sometimes, and this is part of the reason as to why I really dislike the split that we have, because sometimes it's those teams that are, they're really, really struggling. Sometimes those are the ones that they look at some of these types of games and go, anything we can get will be a bonus, and it'll hurt them more than they hurt us. And Martindale will know that if Rangers are going to be weak in particular areas, so for example, if we do move Tav and have to put Aarons in there, I think he'll go for that particular area. I think if he tries to get Magoma tired out, he knows that we don't have left back cover. So there's a whole load of permutations that can kind of come into it. But equally at the same point, it's not just necessarily about those who are injured at the moment. It's about making sure that everyone stays as relatively fresh as they can with that Europa League game in the horizon, because we can't be nonchalant about what we have to be able to recover within Europe. We're starting to see it domestically within the league, and that's great. But being able to try and do something within Europe is still going to be important, even if it just means that we're able to get a stronger finish in terms of how we finish up our Europa League campaign. There are points, there are financial rewards for being able to do that. And ultimately, I want to be able to see a decent Rangers performance in Europe. That's going to be difficult if, as you say, the injury list is starting to rack up.
And this is where it would be so ideal if we could actually go and put this game to bed very early doors on Saturday, Cammy, and then you are in a very luxurious position where you can start resting players and wrapping guys up in cotton wool ahead of the game against Braga next Thursday. But really, we've not done that at all this season. We've not put ourselves in a position where we're able to do that and give some of the guys on the bench a bit of a run out, and you do put yourself in a position where you can protect players. The league's still, over and above Europe, the overriding priority, so I would still be going as close to full strength as I possibly could, injuries obviously notwithstanding, and then try and go and put the game to bed by half time, be a couple of goals up, make it comfortable for yourselves, because I think you hit the nail on the head there. David Martindale knows that this is not a season defining game by any stretch of the imagination for Livingston, so if it's 0-0, they'll sit and keep it tight. If it's 1-0, they'll sit and keep it tight. If it's 2-0, they'll sit and keep it tight just to avoid a bit of a battering. That's kind of what you're going to be up against on Saturday afternoon. So if we are fortunate enough to be 2-0 up at half time, then yeah, you're in a great place to be able to rotate and rest and actually then move your head towards Braga in the midweek. But we need to get the job done here first and foremost, because we cannot countenance the idea of dropping points on Saturday. You may as well just wrap the whole thing up at that point, to be honest. If there's any lingering flicker of hope that we actually still remain to have in this league, then you need to be winning on Saturday. No ifs, no buts, no excuses. It just has to happen.
And you mentioned there an early goal, which I completely agree with would be absolutely lovely. Who's scoring it?
Yeah, answers on the postcard, please.
I mean, I know I joked about it earlier on, and I've said this before about players, and sometimes it's come true and sometimes it hasn't. But it was nice of Majovski to be able to get a goal, because he has been utterly terrible since he's came to Rangers. Chermiti gets a little bit more focus because of the price tag, but right now, over three striking options, it's 65 and pick him as far as I'm concerned. I want at least Chermiti or Majovski to be able to get a goal, to be able to try and get them off and running after a stuttering start. I'd hoped that the goal against Kelly was the turning point for Chermiti. Was proven not to be. Majovski, as I say, I think has been dire since his move has come in. Danilo obviously has chipped in with goals, but I still have this overriding concern with Danilo that he is a week, 2 weeks away, 3 weeks away from another injury that could set him back. It's really, really difficult to be able to understand where you think those goals will come from, given the form these strikers are in.
But this is the thing, and how many times have we said it coming back off of an international break where players have gone away and played really well for their country, and you would hope that would give them a spring in their step coming back into Auchenhowie and into Rangers, and it just doesn't seem to happen. Oliver Antman's a good example of this. I think he got a goal and an assist against Andorra for Finland. You would hope that that would do something for his confidence, because he's been shit out of form for Rangers for months now. But there's no evidence in the past that works for us. Majovski, you're right to point out, took his goal well. There's no evidence that he's going to come back and set the header alight for us either. So that is always the pertinent question with Rangers right now. You can sit here and, as I say, talk about getting fast starts, putting the game to bed. We've got no quality output there in the final third, and it's the thing that's really killed us so far this season, if we're being honest. And until we can hopefully get through to January and fix that, although I'll believe that when I see it, it's going to be the thing that continues to kill us. And that's just to really kind of go back and relitigate a point we've made earlier, why things like set pieces are so important, because when we're not free flowing going forward, when we're not battering teams down and really creating great chance after great chance after great chance, it could be a thing like a set piece goal that unlocks the Livy defence on Saturday afternoon. And it's things like that are going to be so crucial to us until we're in a position where we do feel confident that we have the right attacking players getting into the right position to score quality goals.
Okay, well, it'll be 3 goals from free kicks, and Majowski brace and a Trimite hat trick. Is that what we're going for?
No, you heard it here first.
Yeah, I would not be putting money on it, folks, if you enjoy a tickle. Right, well, that will do us for this week. Thank you very much for listening, everyone. David will be back with you on Monday's flagship to discuss the Livy game and look ahead to Braga, and I'll be back with you next Friday to unpack that Braga game and look forward to next weekend as well. These games are coming thick and fast. Thank you to Mike Lee and Paul Myers. Thank you to you all again for listening, and most of all, for me, thank you so much to Ross for being able to sober up for half an hour to be able to come on and talk about Rangers as well. It's a pleasure to have you on as always, my friend.
It's always a pleasure, mate. Thank you very much.
We'll speak to you again on Monday. Bye-bye, folks.